Elara's fingers had just reached the final clasp of the Alpha King's ceremonial collar when she saw the wrong pull in Beta Ronan's coat. It was barely there, a shallow drag beneath his right arm as he stood beside the royal carriage. But Elara stopped breathing for half a second. She had seen that exact distortion dozens of times while repairing uniforms sent down from the armory laundry. Leather harnesses hidden beneath formal cloth, the weight of concealed steel pulling one shoulder lower than the other. Ronan turned toward the courtyard gates, and the inner seam of his coat shifted. A pale crescent of fresh abrasion flashed near his ribs. Elara's suspicion hardened. No member of the ceremonial escort was supposed to carry a weapon today. The border treaty required both delegations to arrive visibly disarmed, and King Kale himself had repeated the order that morning. Yet his most trusted Beta was standing 10 paces from the carriage with something strapped beneath his coat. The departure bell would sound in minutes. Elara could have finished the collar, lowered her eyes, and let men with rank decide what mattered. Instead, she leaned closer as if correcting the silver clasp. "Your Beta is armed," she whispered. Kale's hand stilled at his side. Elara kept her gaze on the collar. "Don't enter the carriage." Silence stretched between them beneath the noise of horses and waiting guards. Kale did not turn immediately. "You are certain?" His voice was quiet enough that no one nearby looked over. "Watch his right shoulder when he turns." Elara's pulse hammered. If she was wrong, accusing the king's Beta minutes before a treaty departure could cost her far more than her position. Kale's eyes moved past her. Across the courtyard, an officer called Ronan's name. The Beta turned sharply. His right shoulder dropped first. The fabric beneath his arm tightened around a hidden weight. Kale saw it. His expression changed, not to belief, but to attention. That was enough. He stepped away from the carriage instead of toward it. "Ronan." The Beta looked over. "Come here." Elara lowered her hands from Kale's collar, forcing them not to shake. Ronan crossed the courtyard with the calm stride of a man who had guarded a king for years. His eyes flicked once toward Elara. Too quickly, too knowingly. Kale waited until Ronan stood before him. Then he said, "Before I enter that carriage, you are going to explain what you are carrying beneath your coat." For the first time, Ronan's calm expression shifted. Not much, a tightening at the jaw, a brief narrowing of his eyes, but Elara saw it. "I'm carrying nothing that threatens you," he said. Kale's voice hardened. "That was not my question." The guards nearest them had begun to notice the exchange. Beyond the courtyard gates, the treaty envoy checked the position of the sun and spoke impatiently to one of Kale's officers. Kale ignored him. "Open your coat." Ronan hesitated. That hesitation was enough. 2 royal guards stepped forward. Ronan lifted his hands and allowed them to search him. One guard reached beneath his right arm and withdrew a compact spring blade secured in a narrow leather harness. The weapon was small enough to disappear beneath ceremonial clothing and expressly forbidden under the disarmament order. A murmur moved through the nearby escort. Elara felt the weight of Ronan's gaze settle on her. She had been right, but the proof did not make her feel safer. "Why?" Kale asked. Ronan looked at the blade in the guard's hand. "Because something about today's security is wrong." "What?" "I can't discuss it here. You violated my order and concealed a weapon while standing beside my carriage. You will discuss it wherever I tell you to." Ronan glanced toward the servants, foreign observers, and waiting escort. Not in front of them. Then his eyes returned to Elara. "And she should be removed from this courtyard." Elara's stomach tightened. "She noticed what my own guards did not," Kale said. "Which means she was watching things a maid has no reason to watch." Ronan's accusation landed exactly where rank made it dangerous. Elara could feel several faces turning toward her. Kale looked at her now, and she understood that being correct once had not made her trusted. "How did you know?" he asked. "The coat seam," Elara said. "I used to repair uniforms and harness damage from the armory. Laundry. Concealed rigs leave the same where beneath the arm." She pointed toward Ronan without approaching him. "And that harness wasn't thrown on in a hurry. It's sitting too evenly against his body. Someone fitted and tightened it before he came here." Ronan's expression sharpened. Elara met his stare. "Who helped you prepare?" He said nothing. The treaty envoy finally stepped closer. "Your Majesty, if this procession does not leave within minutes, our hosts may consider the delay deliberate." Kale looked from the envoy to Ronan, then to the waiting carriage. "Detain the Beta. Quietly. We delay departure until I know what this is." The guards took Ronan's weapon and moved him aside. Elara released a breath she had not realized she was holding. Then a servant pushed the royal carriage door closed behind Kale's travel cloak. Elara heard the latch catch. One click. Her head turned. She knew that door. It always made two. The second click never came. Elara watched the servant walk away from the carriage, unaware that anything had changed. She knew she should remain where Kale had left her. Instead, she crossed the courtyard toward the carriage. "Your Majesty's cloak is still inside," she told the nearest guard. He barely glanced at her as she opened the door. The cloak lay folded across the seat exactly where she had placed it the previous evening. Elara reached for it, then let her fingers pass close to the latch. Fresh scoring marked the metal beside the catch. Black grease had been disturbed along its lower edge, and a thin smear of dark wax clung around one screw head. Beneath it ran a shallow groove she had never seen before. Something had moved through that groove recently. "What are you doing?" Elara straightened. A guard stood behind her, checking the door. His hand moved toward her arm. "Step away from it." Ronan, still held several yards away under guard, had seen her beside the carriage. "Search her," he called. "If she knew enough to accuse me, perhaps someone should ask why she knows that carriage so well." Elara stepped back before the guard could pull her away. "The latch has been altered." Kale approached at once. "Altered how?" "I don't know. Yet." She refused to give certainty she did not have. "But this screw was opened recently. The grease has been disturbed, and there's a new groove beside the catch." Kale looked toward the carriage, then at her. "How can you know it wasn't always there?" "Because I closed this door last night after putting your travel cloak inside. It made 2 clicks. It has always made 2. The admission changed the faces around her. If Elara had been the last known servant at the carriage, she was no longer merely the person who had found something wrong. She had possessed opportunity. Ronan saw the same problem. Convenient. Elara ignored him. "Hold the carriage here. Don't let anyone move it." The treaty envoy gave an incredulous breath. "We are already late." Kale's gaze remained on the latch. "The carriage stays." Elara looked toward the confiscated spring blade and the leather harness still in the guard's possession. Ronan had been armed beside a carriage someone had secretly altered. The connection seemed obvious. Perhaps too obvious, but she had nothing better yet. "Let me inspect his harness." Ronan's eyes hardened. Kale considered her for a moment. "You may look." Nothing leaves the guard's hands. The harness was brought over. Elara examined the straps, buckles, and worn leather without touching them. Near the lower fastening, caught against a seam, was a streak of pale dust mixed with a sticky amber residue. She leaned closer. It was not something she expected to find on clothing prepared inside the palace. Elara looked from the residue to Ronan. If he had come straight from his quarters to the courtyard, it should not have been there. And if he had not, then before arriving armed beside the king's carriage, the beta had gone somewhere he had not yet admitted. The pale dust bothered Elara more than the blade. She had seen it before on boots and wheel rims returned from the eastern carriage yard, where crushed limestone covered the ground to keep the heavy transport wagons from sinking after rain. The amber residue was pine resin used around the storage sheds there. She looked up at Ronan. "You were in the eastern yard this morning." His silence lasted a fraction. "Too long." Kale noticed. "Answer her." Ronan's jaw tightened. "Before dawn." "Why?" "I received a warning during the night." The courtyard seemed to contract around them. Kale stepped closer. "What warning?" "That you would not reach the treaty site alive." Anger flashed across Kale's face. "And you decided not to tell me?" "I decided not to bring you an anonymous threat with no proof, when canceling today's meeting could put both packs back on the edge of conflict. I checked the route myself." Ronan nodded toward the confiscated blade. "I armed myself because I no longer knew which part of your security I could trust." Elara studied him. It was a plausible explanation, almost too useful now that the weapon had been discovered. "You expect us to believe you broke the king's order to protect him?" "Believe whatever the evidence supports." She looked again at the harness. The limestone dust and resin supported at least one part of his account. They did not prove why he had gone there. "What did you find?" Kale asked. "Nothing on the route that I could confirm. But when I reached the eastern yard, the royal carriage was gone." Elara turned toward the carriage beside them. "Gone where?" "I don't know. I waited." It was returned before the morning staff rotation. Kale called for the transport record. Before anyone could move, a composed voice came from behind the gathering guards. There is no record because the carriage never left. Lord Varec, master of royal transit, approached carrying a narrow ledger beneath one arm. He opened it to the morning entries. Every vehicle movement is sealed. The king's carriage remained assigned here throughout the night. Ronan stared at the page. Then your record is false. Varec's expression cooled. Or an armed man caught violating a royal command is inventing reasons for his behavior. He looked toward Elara. And now a maid who admits she had access to the carriage is helping him delay a treaty procession. The envoy shifted impatiently nearby. Your Majesty, we cannot postpone indefinitely. Varec closed the ledger. The carriage has been inspected under my authority. Your escort is assembled. We should leave. Elara looked at Ronan, then at the altered latch, then at the official record claiming the carriage had never moved. Her first theory no longer held together. If Ronan meant to kill Kale, trapping the king inside a carriage made little sense for a man positioned outside it. Someone had armed suspicion against Ronan almost as carefully as someone had altered that door. The question was no longer whether the beta intended to betray his king. It was who needed Kale to believe that he did. Elara kept her eyes on the carriage. If Ronan was telling the truth, then someone had moved it before dawn, altered the lock, returned it, and falsified the record. The weapon had distracted them from the more important question. What was the altered door meant to do? I need to see the latch again, she said. Varec frowned. You have delayed the king enough. Kale did not look at him. Let her see it. Elara opened the door and studied the shallow groove beside the catch. She remembered repairing restraint locks from transport wagons in the armory laundry, where damaged straps and metal fittings sometimes arrived together. Those locks used a sliding exterior catch. The wear always ran in one direction. This groove did too. This wasn't changed to keep someone out, she said. It was changed to keep someone in. Ronan moved closer under guard. Explain. Elara pointed without touching. Once an exterior piece engages this groove, the inside handle can move without releasing the door. Kale's expression sharpened. Someone intended to lock the carriage from outside. Ronan looked toward the courtyard gates. There's only one place on the treaty route where that matters. He described the narrow ravine beyond the eastern ridge. The road tightened there so severely that mounted guards had to fall into a broken formation around the carriage. For several minutes, the king would be separated from much of his escort. Elara felt the pieces settle into a shape she had not seen before. Kale enters the carriage. The procession reaches the ravine. Someone engages the altered lock. The escort divides. Whatever attack follows finds the Alpha King trapped inside a reinforced cabin with no clean space to shift or escape. Ronan's concealed blade had not been prepared to create that trap. He had armed himself because he feared one. His secrecy had simply made him the perfect man to blame. Kale turned to Elara. There was no dismissal in his face now. What do you need? She had expected an order. Instead, he was asking. The transport ledger, access to the eastern yard, and permission to question anyone who handled this carriage since last night. Granted. Varec stepped forward. Your Majesty, granted, Kale repeated. Elara met his eyes for only a moment. He was not promising to believe everything she said. He was giving her the means to prove it. A guard came running across the courtyard before she could move. Your Majesty. He stopped hard, breathless. We searched the maid's quarters after the carriage concern was reported. Elara went still. The guard opened a cloth bundle. Inside lay a duplicate metal screw, black carriage grease, and a lump of dark transport wax. These were hidden beneath her mattress. Every face turned toward Elara. Varec said nothing. He did not need to. The evidence had just made the woman investigating the sabotage look like the person who had committed it. The courtyard seemed to go silent around Elara. She stared at the objects in the guard's cloth bundle. Black grease, dark wax, a new screw. Each one matched something she had just identified on the altered carriage, and everyone had supposedly been found beneath her mattress. Search the rest of her quarters, Varec said, and arrest her before she contaminates anything else. Kale's gaze stayed on Elara. Did you put those there? No, can you prove that? She forced herself not to answer too quickly. Not yet. Varec gave a cold nod. Then we have a maid who admits she handled the royal carriage last night, discovers alterations this morning, and possesses the materials required to make them. Her accusation against the beta conveniently created the confusion she needed. The explanation was clean enough to frighten her. Worse, Elara saw the mistake she had made. She had concentrated so completely on Ronan that she had never considered someone might move against her while she investigated him. Kale could not discard physical evidence merely because her earlier warning had been correct. "Confine her," he ordered. Varric started to speak, but Kale cut him off. "Here in the palace guard room. She does not go below." Elara surrendered her keys and was escorted from the courtyard. Before the door closed behind her, Ronan's voice stopped the guards. "The screw." He stood several steps away, still under supervision. "Let her look at the head." A guard held it where Elara could see without touching. A tiny stamped mark sat near the edge. She recognized it. "New transport stock," she said. "That maker's stamp wasn't used when the king's carriage was built." Ronan nodded. "So whoever planted it obtained replacement hardware recently." Elara remembered the bright metal beneath the old carriage latch. The planted evidence had not only accused her. It had connected her room to the source of the modification. "Search everything," she told Kale. "My room, my work records, every key issued to me. Record who finds each object and where." Varric's brows lifted. "You would volunteer that?" "If I ask the king to trust evidence, I don't get to hide from it when it points at me." Her employment, privacy, and name could disappear with that search, but refusing would leave the false story intact. Kale studied her for a long moment, then ordered the examination documented in front of witnesses. Time dragged while the departure window narrowed. Finally, a guard returned carrying the wax from Elara's room beside an issue ledger. "We traced the batch," he said. "This transport wax was never issued to household servants." His eyes shifted toward Varric. The entire batch was signed out to the Royal Transit Office. Elara looked through the open guardroom door toward the waiting carriage. The evidence against her had not vanished, but whoever had tried to bury her with it had left a trail back to the very office responsible for that carriage. The wax traced access to the Royal Transit Office, but access was not guilt. Varric controlled dozens of clerks, drivers, stable hands, and stores. Elara knew accusing him now would only repeat the mistake she had made with Ronan, seeing one connection and deciding it was the whole truth. "Who signed out the replacement hardware?" she asked. The guard checked the issue ledger. "The requisition carries the transit office seal. No individual name." Ronan looked toward Varric. "Convenient. Standard procedure," Varric replied. "And proof that anyone working beneath my authority might have obtained it." He was right, which made Elara dislike the answer more. She asked for the carriage movement records and the names of everyone on the Eastern Yard rotation. One stable worker kept appearing near the relevant times. When brought forward, the young man could barely meet Kale's eyes. Elara softened her voice. "Did the royal carriage leave the yard before dawn?" His face drained of color. Varric spoke before he could answer. "Remember that accusing an officer falsely has consequences." The worker flinched. Elara understood. "Don't tell me who you think is responsible. Tell me what you saw." After a long silence, he admitted the carriage had been moved under a sealed order. He had kept quiet because the authorization bore Varric's official seal. The order was produced. The impression was genuine, but Elara noticed something odd in its placement. Routine transport sheets in the ledger carried seals quickly pressed beside the clerk's notation. This one sat precisely centered beneath the movement instruction, positioned as though whoever made it expected the page to be examined later. It was not enough to convict Varric, but it proved the carriage movement had been deliberately concealed behind legitimate authority. Ronan returned from questioning the route guards with another piece. Several nobles who opposed the treaty had used Varric's office to press for changes to the Eastern escort schedule. If Kale died near rival territory, blame would fall naturally across the border. The treaty would die with him. Still, motive and access were not public proof. The departure bell was almost due. Elara looked at the carriage and understood that the conspiracy had one advantage left. They believed their plan had been discovered too late to use. "We shouldn't cancel the procession," she said. Ronan stared at her. "Absolutely not. If we stop now, whoever altered that carriage can deny everything. And the treaty may collapse anyway." Kale understood first. "You want them to think I'm still entering it." Elara nodded. "Change the guards without making it visible. Let whoever controls the trap believe it can still work." "That puts you beside the carriage," Ronan said. "They already tried to make me the saboteur. If they realize I know more, I'm already a target." She turned to Kale. "But this has to be your choice." Kale looked from her to the waiting procession. Then he ordered the guardroom door opened. Release her. Varric stepped forward. Her innocence has not been established. Then responsibility for releasing her is mine. Cale faced the assembled officers. Elara will conduct the final inspection, and her instructions will be followed. The political weight of the declaration settled over the courtyard. If she failed, Cale had made himself answerable for trusting her. He came to stand before her. No command. No demand for certainty. Tell me where to stand. Elara indicated the carriage step. Close enough that they believe you'll enter. Not far enough that the door can take you with it. Cale moved exactly where she directed him. Ronan reluctantly took his assigned position, visibly without his confiscated blade. Elara walked beside the carriage, exposed to every watching window and every person in the escort. Then the departure bell began to ring. The bell's first strike rolled across the courtyard. Cale stepped toward the carriage exactly as Elara had instructed. Every eye followed the Alpha King, which was what they needed. Elara moved close enough to straighten the edge of his ceremonial collar, repeating the harmless gesture that had begun all of this. Her fingers touched the silver clasp. "Wait for my hand," she whispered. Cale gave no sign that he had heard. Ronan stood several paces behind them, visibly disarmed, while the repositioned guards maintained the appearance of an ordinary escort. Cale placed one foot on the carriage step. Elara watched the door, the driver, and the line of officials beyond him. A man beside the lead horses glanced toward the courtyard. Then Elara saw Varric's hand move, a small downward motion, almost lost beneath the fall of his sleeve. The driver reached beneath the outer edge of the carriage door. Metal scraped. The exterior catch began sliding into the fresh groove before Cale was fully inside. Elara dropped her hand from his collar. Now. Cale stepped backward. Ronan moved at once. Two loyal guards seized the driver as he tried to pull away, but the horses lurched forward under a shouted command. "Move the carriage." Varric barked. The words cut through the courtyard. Everyone heard them. So did Cale. The carriage rolled only a few feet before the guards stopped the horses. Its door slammed shut. This time the sound was unmistakable. One hard click followed by the scrape of the concealed exterior lock engaging. Elara pulled the inside handle through the open window. It moved uselessly. "That is the mechanism," she said. Varric's face had gone still. Cale turned toward him. "You ordered that carriage forward after its driver was seized." "I was protecting the procession." "From what?" Varric had no answer that did not require knowledge he had denied possessing. The detained driver was searched. Guards found a route token directing the royal carriage into the altered escort formation at the eastern ravine. The carriage itself yielded the matching new hardware beneath the latch. The transport wax matched the restricted badge traced to Varric's office. Then the frightened stable worker stepped forward with the sealed movement order and repeated, before the council and treaty witnesses, that the carriage had been taken from the eastern yard before dawn under that authority. Ronan's anonymous warning was traced to a transit clerk who had noticed the unauthorized movement, but had been too afraid to report openly. Piece by piece, the false story collapsed. Ronan's blade had been a response to the threat. The altered carriage had been the trap. The movement order, restricted materials, route token, and Varric's own command connected the trap to the office that had concealed it. Varric tried once to call the order an emergency security measure. Cale stopped him. "You knew how the door would behave before anyone here demonstrated it." Royal guards closed around Varric. Cale ordered him arrested for the attempted assassination and the effort to provoke conflict between packs. Ronan remained under formal discipline for concealing the warning and violating the weapons order. Elara was publicly cleared. The treaty procession did not dissolve. Cale ordered a replacement escort and sent the witness's verified account ahead to explain the delay. As Varric was led away, Elara looked at the locked carriage. Her first warning had been right. Her first explanation had not. And they were alive because the truth had been allowed to change as the evidence did. The treaty survived the morning. By the time Cale reached the border under a reorganized escort, the witness's account had already gone ahead of him, leaving no space for Varric's allies to turn the delay into an accusation from the rival pack. Varric remained under royal guard awaiting formal judgment for the attempt on Cale's life, and for engineering an attack meant to ignite conflict between the packs. Ronan kept his position as beta, but not without consequence. He accepted formal discipline for carrying the forbidden blade, and concealing the warning that had sent him to the eastern yard before dawn. When he found Elara afterward, he did not defend his decision. "If I had trusted someone else with what I knew," he said, "Varek would have had one less lie to use against us." Elara understood the admission for what it was and left it there. Her own future changed more quietly. Kill did not offer her a title at court or pretend one morning had erased the rank that had made everyone doubt her. Instead, he created a civilian threat examiner's position attached to royal security and offered it to her. She would have authority to report irregularities outside the military chain of command. Elara considered the offer before answering. "One condition. My reports are recorded with the evidence behind them. No one accepts them because I'm an Omega, and no one dismisses them because I'm one." Kale held her gaze. "Agreed." Then, after a pause, he asked something less official. "Do you still want to work this close to me after what my court nearly cost you?" He left the answer entirely with her. Elara thought of the guard room, the evidence beneath her mattress, and the moment he had placed his own authority behind her judgment before he knew whether she would be vindicated. "Yes," she said, "on the terms we just established." A few days later, a replacement carriage waited in the courtyard. Elara inspected its wheels, hinges, latch, and escort before Kale approached. When he reached her, he bent his head slightly without being asked. Elara almost smiled as she straightened his ceremonial collar. Her fingers checked the seam automatically. No hidden weight. She looked past him at the guards, then tested the carriage door. 2 clean clicks answered her. Kale glanced toward the step, but remained where he was. Only then did Elara realize what he was doing. The Alpha King was waiting. Not for permission from his council. Not for reassurance from his beta. For her judgment. Elara smoothed the collar once and stepped aside. "You can enter this one." Kale did.